Hello. Hold on. I have to. Oh no, wait. Where's my. Oh no. One second. Uh oh. I left something very. Hold up. Uh-huh. Got it now. There we go. Up. There we go. Music end. Where's the microphone? The microphone is here. And I am. Hold on, where's the. Kansas. Kansas is our. I have a feeling that we're not in the trans-friendly Kansas anymore. We're in the transphobic Kansas now, unfortunately. That's the Kansas that we are inhabiting now. What the? Um, oh, like what's going on? Browser, properties, Chrome, Kansas. Wow. What a development, huh? Who could have known that the US would start going after trans people after the State of the Union in which President Trump very aggressively went after trans people? Who could have guessed that would happen? Who could have predicted such a development? Certainly not me. Certainly not me. Hello, Inkub. How are you? How are you doing this fine day? How's your... Well, it's Friday now. Friday now in Ukraine. It's the 27th, which means that tomorrow will be my birthday. I can already make that announcement. I was born on the 28th of February, which is interestingly enough, I was almost born on the 29th of February. So I was born close to midnight on the 28th of February. I was muted. So how is everyone? Yeah, I noticed. I noticed too late. Okay, I'm sorry. Mm. Hello. Okay, I am here. Oh my God. All right. Sorry. Now I'm asking you people what's up. Okay. I'm asking you what's up. You know. Mhm. Oi, 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 oi. All right, let's start. I'm ready to start. Druid says, I gave everyone more goodies. Okay. So I guess we're gonna start with a transphobia thing because I'm trans and it seems like trans people just, a trans content creator cannot not do trans topics because we're typecast into it. Like it or not, if the trans content creators won't do anything about trans topics, then the trans topics, I guess, will not be discussed at all. Although I'm pretty sure that the Kansas thing is a pretty big, pretty loud thing that has been discussed by many creators, not just trans creators. There's been two things happening in Kansas, apparently. At least two trans-related things have been happening in Kansas since the ill-fated State of the Union speech, where Trump just attacked trans people, attacked trans youth, basically just created a narrative of the same old narrative of trans youth being, well, not, there not being anything like trans youth. And we'll talk about the dams later. We'll talk about Ukraine after I do the trans thing. That sounded awful, but you know. The narrative is that there is no such thing as trans youth, that there is no such thing as trans young people. And mm, it's harmful. It's genuinely harmful. And it leads to, well, let's start with the trans youth thing. Kansas bans gender reassignment for children after lawmakers override governor's veto. So basically, on its face, it sounds like, oh, okay, the kids will not get surgeries anymore. Transgender surgeries are banned. Hooray! The thing that everybody said was mostly not happening will not be happening, which I already find ban across the board to be iffy to begin with because there are certain individual situations, there were certain rare situations in which those surgeries were very warranted, but that is not actually the extent of what this ban reaches. This ban apparently just bans across the board all sort of trans care for the youth, for the children, and that is puberty blockers, any type of HRT. I'm pretty sure that it also includes even social transition. So it just bans trans healthcare across the board for young people, which I don't think I have to explain why this is a bad thing. I mean, I do have to explain why it's a bad thing. It's my job basically. The thing is that, like it or not, trans youth exists. There are young people that don't identify with the gender that they have been assigned to at birth. They do suffer from gender dysphoria. There is a heightened risk of them harming themselves or even committing suicide. And banning healthcare for these children will not solve the situation in the slightest, will not help them in the slightest, will not prevent harm to the children. The only thing that this will accomplish is that the conservative MAGA crowd will feel satisfied that finally transgenderism is being defeated. And it's ridiculous. It's really, and to address something that was said in the chat, I really irritates me a bit when people treat topics that are a matter of, that are discussed by medical specialists, that are pretty much researched, even though the MAGA crowd would like you to believe that it's not researched, that it's somehow a matter of belief. I don't believe in vaccination, or I don't believe in puberty blockers. It's not a matter of belief. Like, just look at the evidence, research the topic. Like, it's not something like a God that you can either believe it or not believe it, and then it's up to you, it's up in the air. Or you can believe that after death we will continue living in some form or we will cease to exist, and you can either believe it or not. No, there's actual data, actual studies that you can look into. It's not a matter of belief. Certain topics are not just a matter of belief. And it really discourages me to see that people treat those things as a matter of belief. You know? It's a thing that is very unfortunate. Let me see. There's an exact list of what this ban entails. Where is it? The measure prohibits doctors from providing puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and gender reassignment surgeries to minors diagnosed with gender dysphoria. The law takes effect later this month. It also strips state support for transition-related procedures and threatens the medical licenses of doctors who continue to provide such services. So what does transition-related procedures mean? Does that mean social transition? Hello, Simone Pierre Dubé. Does that mean that if a child is allowed, let's say, a child that is assigned as a boy at birth, is allowed to wear a dress, will the psychologist that allows it be stripped of a license? Is this where this will lead to? Kelly, a Democrat, vetoed the bill on February 11th, saying that it infringes on parental rights and warning of economic consequences, which is very interesting because when it comes to educating children, often MAGA crowd, often the Republicans say that that education should be in the hands of the parents, that if the parents want to teach their children that evolution is fake and that creation is true, then it should be in the hands of the parents. Everything is in the hands of the parents until it's not. Until suddenly, oh no, actually, parents should not be able to decide to support their children in transition. Actually, it should not be in the hands of the parents. Actually, suddenly now it should be in the hands of the state. The state should dictate parents on how they should raise their children all of a sudden when they are affirming of their children's identity. It's very interesting how that goes, right? How selective the whole idea that certain things should be in the hands of parents is. Like, I find this very interesting. There you go. Warning of economic consequences. Infringing on parental rights is not appropriate, nor is it a Kansas value, she said in a statement at the time. This legislation will also drive families, businesses, and healthcare workers out of our state, stifling our economy and exacerbating our workforce shortage issues, which I also find interesting that people have to resort to economic arguments against the banning of healthcare for children, when I feel like the argument should be strictly the good of the children, not our economy will suffer if we do this. I don't feel like this is the right way to go with this argumentation. I feel like this is a misguided direction to take this conversation in. Kansas legislature's actions follows national efforts under the Trump administration to curb gender reassignment procedures. President Donald Trump recently issued an executive order to end federal support for such procedures, calling them tantamount to chemical and surgical mutilation that are part of a dangerous trend and a stain on our nation's history. Yeah, because everything's a trend now. You have two people that happen to be trans that committed a shooting. Oh, it's a trend now. 1% of the population, like how many even within a percentage of a population, because not all trans people get gender assigning surgeries. Not all trans people get bottom surgeries. So a percentage within a percentage get a procedure. Therefore, it's a dangerous trend. It's just empty fear mongering. There is no substance behind it. There's no data behind it. The smallest minority of minorities has access to a surgery that basically saves their life, and it's considered a stain on the nation's history. Trump also signed an executive order declaring that it is the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female, which we will go back to it right away because it also actually connects to a different story in Kansas as well, because it seems like there is a very much increased targeting of trans people in Kansas, which might also spread to different states, but let's focus on this for now. Across the country, ideologues who deny the biological reality of sex have increasingly used legal and other socially coercive means to permit men to self-identify as women and gain access to intimate single-sex spaces and activities designed for women. I have no idea what activities designed for women are. Like, if anybody can give me an example of an activity designed for women, I'm all ears. From women's domestic abuse shelters to women's workplace showers, Trump's order states this is wrong. Of course, this is not backed by any data. There is no actual evidence that there are men who falsely identify as women to gain access to women's spaces. There's no such evidence available. There's not an epidemic of men abusing women in bathrooms, in changing spaces, in showers, and then saying, "Oh yeah, no, I just identify as a woman, so it's okay." There is no such thing is happening. No such thing has been. If it were happening, we would hear all about it all over the news 24/7. It would be weaponized. It would be just blasted. Trump would be talking about it nonstop in every single speech. Trump would be giving examples of such things during every single speech because he talks about trans people every single time he can. On every opportunity, he brings up the topic of trans people. So if it was actually happening, believe me, that this would be broadcasted, it would be amplified, it would be weaponized against trans people. So basically, the ACLU has described that order as requiring discrimination against transgender people across much of the federal government. Because yeah, that is the reality of it. Simone Pierre Dubé says, aggressors don't care if it's illegal to abuse women in their bathrooms. Yeah, they don't. But that's not really what this whole thing is about. It's not about the safety of women. I don't think any of us live under this naive assumption that any part of this farce is about protecting women. I don't think anybody believes that at that point. So this is children being attacked after the very direct attack of the Trump administration, of Trump himself during his address of the union on trans youth, giving an example of a detransitioner child. because of course, if anybody did transitions, that means that nobody should be able to transition, because that makes perfect sense, right? If anybody regrets a surgery, that means we should ban our surgery. That states to, it just makes perfect sense, right? But that's actually not everything. That is not everything that has been happening in Kansas, because Kansas has been very active. Kansas has been very busy in its transphobic, I don't know, in its crusade, I guess. I want to say crusade, because we see children being targeted, but also now we are seeing adults being targeted, because why not? All trans people should be forced to go back to the closet. All trans people should be forced to detransition. Kansas invalidates driver's licenses, birth certificates of over 1,000 transgender residents, because you remember that executive order that was mentioned in the article before? The one that demands that there are only two sexes and that people should identify not by their gender, not how they identify, but their sex assigned at birth. Well, that is now affecting 1,000 transgender individuals whose driver's licenses and birth certificates, as we just read in the headline, have been invalidated, which will force them to have their sex on their documents, which basically will completely invalidate their identity. It will simply, oh, you're male, oh, you're female. And that is basically the primary thing that by which they will be identified. They will be naturally misgendered, because that is what their documentation will state, because the majority of society conflates gender with sex. So to a lot of people who will read these documents, it will be the same thing. So they will use the pronouns not associated with the person's identity, but they will use the pronouns associated with the person's sex assigned at birth. And it will, again, this will just cause harm. But the problem with this is that MAGA does not really care about harm caused to trans people. The move affects more than 1,000 people. The law requires residents to change their gender identification to the sex they were assigned at birth. So basically what I just said. And also bans residents from changing their gender on those documents in the future. See? Actually, in Poland, this is a very interesting fact. In Poland, when you transition socially, which takes a bit of time because you have to go to court, you have to sue your parents for misgendering at birth, you have to do all those procedures that can take years to finalize. At the end of that procedure, you actually are allowed to change your birth certificate, which is interesting. In Poland, there is such a thing as a shortened birth certificate. And that shortened birth certificate that you can show at all offices, your sex, interestingly, is changed to kind of reflect because in Poland, the same word is used for sex and gender. So to simplify things, your gender/sex assigned at birth is changed on your shortened birth certificate to the one that you identify with. So your shortened birth certificate will say woman whenever you present it in any sort of office. And there's the full birth certificate, which will not say the gender that you identify, but it will say that it has been changed from the one that was assigned to you at birth to the one that you identify as, which is also a form of acknowledgement that such a transition has happened. But your shortened birth certificate will say the gender that you are identifying with, which is in stark contrast with the current Trump policy with the executive order that has been signed by Trump. It is in stark contrast with what is required of trans people in the United States currently, that they will change all of their documentation to reflect their sex assigned at birth and are banned from changing it in the future. Transgender people in the United States have faced increasing restrictions at the state and national levels. Republican President Donald Trump has taken a particularly hard line since returning to office last year, issuing multiple executive orders limiting transgender rights, and also straight up lying about the issue, saying that he has banned transgender for everyone because everyone apparently wants to be transgender now. Every single American wants to be transgender for everyone. He panders to transphobic rhetoric all the time. He makes statements such as, no matter how much chemicals you pump into your body, you will always be a man and never will be a woman, because when discussing trans people, bigots like Trump usually never discuss trans men or non-binary people. They always discuss trans women. It's always about trans women. The discussion on trans people always focuses on women, and that is because trans women are seen by MAGA people as men who are predators. Because of course the Trump administration will see men as predators inherently. Because, let's face it, all evidence seems to point in the direction to a conclusion that actually all men within the Trump administration are predators, but we're not going to get into that now. The fact is that trans men and non-binary people who are assigned female at birth are usually just treated as poor, naive women who have been indoctrinated into the transgenderism cult. That is usually the rhetoric that is discussed around trans men and non-binary people that were assigned female at birth. And usually that leads to those people just being completely pushed out of the conversation. And of course, there's also the fact that a lot of bigots actually fetishize trans people to an extremely disgusting and disturbing degree. We've seen the Epstein files. We've all seen the disturbing amount of space that trans issues have been given in the Epstein files. We've seen how people in those files have fetishized trans people, discussed forcibly transitioning children, and preparing them for clients. And we all have a pretty broad idea as to who those clients were. So I'm just gonna use the very well-known phrase now that every accusation seems to be an admission. Every accusation of wrongdoing when it comes to the trans community seems to be an admission of guilt. Because as Simon Pierre Dubé says in the chat, they are scared to be seduced by trans women also, even if most of them are chasers. So that is the situation that we have found ourselves in. Every accusation is an admission. One Trump directive states that the US government will recognize only two sexes, male and female. Another sought to exclude transgender athletes from female sports, because this whole thing is also, it's just preying on people's misinformation, preying on people's feelings, and preying on people's intuition, common sense. It feels intuitive that even when transitioning, people that were assigned male at birth would have a biological advantage over people that were assigned female at birth, right? It just feels so intuitive that those people have just stronger bodies, even if they take hormones or even if they undergo transition. To many people, that just seems obvious. It just feels like common sense. They will not look at evidence. They will not look at studies that, at most extreme, just are inconclusive. Those studies either say that the effect of transition on the equality in sports is inconclusive, and a lot of them say that it's negligible, and actually when undergoing transition, trans women do not have a significant advantage over cis women in sports. So another topic that is being completely dishonestly weaponized, completely dishonestly discussed, but nobody will care. Nobody cares about evidence. Nobody cares about studies on the issue. People only will care about what feels intuitive, about what feels to be obvious. Because you know what? When you present the studies, when you present the data, it is also easy for a MAGA politician to say, oh yeah, of course you're going to bring up studies. Of course you're going to bring up the data that were created by the American healthcare lobby, that were created by the blue-haired liberals that just want to sell and profit on people that are confused. It's just so simple to dismiss data and say, oh yeah, of course that data was just created in order for the medical establishment to make billions and billions of dollars on transitioning people. And that is an argument that I am increasingly, unfortunately, hearing from people. Oh yeah, of course you have your evidence, but I have my common sense. I know what feels intuitive. I know what feels to be correct. I know what feels to me that makes sense. And people just go with that and reject evidence, reject studies. Especially since the head of the US healthcare, RFK Jr., openly calls for the rejection of experts and says that you should just do your own research, I guess. You should just follow your own common sense, because that is the current name of the game. Don't trust experts. That is not the scientific way. The new Kansas law puts transgender people in danger at any time they interact with law enforcement or apply for a job or for housing or public benefits, said Harper Sedlin, a senior staff attorney with the LGBTQ and HIV Project and the American Civil Liberties Union. The mismatch between how they present themselves in the world and their driver's license puts them at risk of discrimination or violence. And so that's why many trans people choose to change their sex markers on our licenses so that we can live as ourselves in society and keep ourselves safe. Yeah, of course. It makes perfect sense for people to choose to want their documents to match their identity. This is the most obvious thing in the world. Okay? It's just, there's not a more obvious thing in the world. Kansas residents were permitted to change their gender markers on driver's licenses and birth certificates until 2023, when those changes were halted amid litigation initiated by the state's Republican Attorney General Chris Kobach last year. The courts permitted transgender residents to once again make those changes. State lawmakers then introduced the bill, enacted into law after the Kansas legislature overrode Democratic Governor Laura Kelly's veto. And this is where we are. Trans youth is being targeted. Any kind of transition is being forbidden, and doctors will lose licenses over it. And now transgender adults are targeted as well, because of course the line has always been, oh, we don't care what adults do. We don't care what consenting adults do with their bodies. We don't care how adults identify. We don't like it. We don't agree with it. But you know what? Adults can do whatever they want. What we want is to save the children. They don't, of course, they don't care about the children, but they say we only care about the children. We care about those who cannot consent. If you cannot drink, if you cannot smoke, then or get a tattoo, you should not be able to transition, is the line. But of course, we all know that's complete nonsense. We all know that those people hate trans people across the board and want trans people erased across the board, want to ban transition across the board, want ban trans people from being identified as themselves in public, and want to basically drive trans people to non-existence in the public sphere out of fear of being discriminated against or even attacked or killed or abused. And it's gonna get worse, I fear. Or I'm gonna say that I'm pretty confident that it's gonna get worse. More states are going, especially red states, are going to very aggressively and very confidently adopt similar measures. Similar laws will be adopted in different states. Different states will require trans people to change their IDs, will invalidate their current IDs, driver's licenses, etc. That this will definitely happen in other states. I'm willing to bet other states will also aggressively adopt the measures to halt any transition procedures for the youth. We're seeing a very amassed attack on trans rights in the United States, and I'm very much afraid of the effect that it will have on different countries than just the US. I'm afraid for how this will affect trans rights all over the world. I am very much afraid how this will affect trans rights in Poland, because right now Poland is ripped between the United States and Europe, and I'm very, very happy that the European Union has very recently affirmed that trans women are women, in a stark contrast with Trump's policy and Trump's administration's policy. The European Union has affirmed that yes, trans women are women and have to be treated as such and have to have access to the same facilities that cis women do. So we have a very strong contrast when it comes to trans rights and when it comes to the treatment of people, when it comes to the treatment of human rights. But Poland, unfortunately, it does not follow that countries like Poland will adopt a similar stance. Because should the Polish far right come back into power, right now we just have a president that represents what the far right wants for this country. Should the far right come back into Poland, Poland will absolutely adopt all the things that the United States has adopted, and we will see, especially since Poland is already very bad on the LGBT rights. And there are many other countries that will probably adopt similar measures as the United States, because like it or not, for better and for worse, the United States is the most powerful country in the world, and very much so serves as an example for many other countries on what to do when it comes to those social issues. So it seems like, once again, the Trump administration is making things miserable for people domestically, and I'm also afraid that the Trump administration will, in effect, without even meaning to do it, make things miserable for people abroad as well. So we have to brace ourselves and we have to push back against it. I'm not sure what advice I can give when it comes to how to push back against something like that. If you can call your local politicians to make it known to them that you care about that issue, to take part in local protests if there are any organized. Just I'm afraid I don't really have any specific advice that I can give. Things look really bleak on that front. Things are looking very bleak. And of course, there have been people that have been relentlessly saying, no, this will not happen. Even if Trump wins, he will definitely not go after trans people. You've got to be kidding. Just there's no transphobia going on. It's all in your head. And now we're seeing the results. What? The administration is going after trans people? No, you've got to be, no, that's not true. The government is definitely not trying to erase trans people. Well, yeah, it is. Very openly so. This was literally one of Trump's first words after he won the election, that he's going to end the gender lunacy. The Trump administration very aggressively tries to erase trans people from public life. And I feel like we have to push back against it more than ever. We have to talk about it more than ever. We have to push back against misinformation regarding these topics more than ever. This is why I guess I will have to do more trans related subjects I wasn't doing this exactly consciously. I'm not exactly doing this consciously. But I've not been a person that has been discussing many trans issues, even though I'm a trans creator. I don't really talk super much about trans issues, about trans legislation, anti-trans legislation. I don't really talk super much about different types of rights that is given and taken away in Europe, in the United States, in Poland, etc. But I guess it increasingly seems that I will have to put more segments about trans issues into my repertoire, because the world is becoming even more hostile towards trans people as time goes on. Things are not getting better. Well, you could say that trans rights are getting better in Europe, but let's remember that the resolution that has been made in the European Union is a non-binding resolution. It's just basically a symbolic resolution that states that trans women are women. But each individual state will still claim that they have the right to govern themselves as they wish. I know Poland will do it. So I don't feel like this resolution will lead to radical advancement of trans rights in Poland, or in Ukraine for that matter. But Ukraine is not a member of the European Union yet. Vladimir says, sounds like the US is becoming a little bit fash. Wow, who would have thought that would happen? Well, everybody who did not vote for Trump could have forethought it. Everybody who did not vote for Trump saw it coming. And now increasingly those who did vote for Trump are just having a shocked face. Wait, Epstein files? Huh? Oh no. Well, it's okay. If the Trump administration falters, we all know that there is a good solution to all of these things. We all know that the go-to solution is to simply blame the minorities. We all know that the go solution is to blame the people, the immigrants, to blame the asylum seekers. The blame game, that's the name of the game. We all know that, right? It's all about not talking about the real issues, not talk about the prices that are actually rising, even though Trump keeps talking that they are falling. The gasoline prices that are not as amazing as Trump said, the food prices, the housing that is not really in a great situation as well, as far as I know. Healthcare, which is abysmal as always, because the United States has, I believe, some of the worst healthcare in the world. Yeah, so who cares about those issues when you can just blame trans people, when you can just blame the murderers, quote unquote, and psychos that came through the open border under Joe Biden, because it was an open border. We all know there were no borders under Joe Biden, and America was a dead country, and now it's the hottest country on earth. Greater Rain says, when people say being trans is a mental illness, it's weird that they don't want trans people to get proven treatment, which is transitioning. It's almost like they don't actually have sympathy for trans people as individuals and as humans, but just see them as undeserving and broken. Yeah, that actually goes into the attitude of many right-wing people, many conservative people when it comes to mental illness. That is why they want gender dysphoria not to be a mental disorder anymore, but for it to be classified as a mental illness. Because, yes, actually, the Republicans, especially MAGA people, see people with mental illnesses as fundamentally broken, that should be locked in asylums and never let out, and isolated from society. Why do you think that whenever a right-wing hack criticizes or makes fun of who they do not like, they call them mentally ill? It's a go-to insult for all far-right hacks. Oh, this is a mental illness. That is a mental illness. Trans people, transness, that's just a mental illness. Oh, being LGBT, that's a mental illness. Being woke, that's a mental illness. Mental illness. That's just their go-to. Because it's a form of dehumanization for them. It's not about treating mental illness. It's about isolating people with mental illnesses, locking them away and throwing away the key, preferably. That's the solution that those people would like when it comes to the topic of mental illness. Vladimir says, and it's almost like there is some construction work is going on with the detention centers to concentrate huge amounts of people in there. Yeah, interesting, right? Alligator themed, some of them are. Some of those camps are animal themed, let's just say. And it's just getting worse. We're just going to have to wait for those midterms and see how that turns out. See if the political situation in the US turns around in any meaningful way. Because as things are now, things are just not okay. Things are just not great. And I think it's time to acknowledge that. It's time not to lie about the fact that things are not ideal. So that's the topic of trans people. I've seen many people who are commentators. I've seen many streamers and commentators, trans advocates, describing this as the Trump administration hunting trans people. And you know what? I don't think it's a mischaracterization. I don't think it's a mischaracterization to say that there is an active hunt on trans people, taking away children's rights to any sort of medical health care around transness, invalidating the documentation of adults. Yeah, it's a hunt. I'm gonna say it. I am not afraid to say it. All right. I think we've touched upon I think we've exhausted this topic for now. What do you think? Any questions? I like to ask that after every time I finish a segment. I do like to ask if there are people that have anything to add or anything to. I also kind of thought that I would change things around and maybe take a more discussion tone than just read the. I could have read out the entire articles, but I feel like I've basically distilled I feel like I've distilled the topic. I don't think there was much more than reading out the entirety of the articles. I think um, giving my thoughts on the matter and distilling the thing worked out pretty well. Of course, I'm not a cool, smooth talker, but it's my quirky way of talking is what you come here for, I think. It's my quirkiness that brings you here. Make America gay again. It's my style of communication is what drives you to become super fans of Lucy Haza. So I guess now I want to talk about European politics. I guess this is a thing that Vladimir will be interested in. We're gonna talk about hello, the Kentucky atheists. Have you caught any of that? Have you caught any of the trans segment that I just did? What did you think? Or have you just arrived on this at this stream? How have you been? How was your Thursday thing that you've talked about? How was your Thursday show? Oh yeah, I'm going on the Kentucky Atheist show next Thursday. Yeah, also I welcome you to. I invite you to come to the stream that I'll be doing probably on Saturday because Saturday will be my birthday. Aaron was an hour late, but then I'm going, well, that's good. What did you talk about? What did you guys talk about? Yes. The 28th will be my birthday. So I'm probably going to end up doing some sort of a birthday stream. All right. Let's talk about the Hungary thing, which is my favorite topic in the world. You don't even know. Hold on. Let's see, what will you do for your birthday stream? Valheim. I don't know. I'm gonna do a bunch of this, maybe bunch of call-ins while playing games. The Kentucky atheist has talked about the challenges of talking to right-wing idiot, education, and corruption. Yeah, I just did a segment on trans people being under attack in Kansas, which is a pretty big thing. All right, well, now we're going to be talking about Hungary and Ukraine and Slovakia a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind playing Valheim on Thursday. And doing call-ins. So I want to have this article up for this because by the way, what was your impression of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream? I like it because I like the genre. It's one of those genres that I really like. Dead genres, I might add. Point and click games are dead. Point and click adventure games are dead. It's one of those games when you have to click on everything, you have to click on every single pixel available on the screen, and it's easy to get stuck, which is one of those kind of negatives of these games, because those riddles can be really obscure. Okay, those riddles can be really messed up, and sometimes it's just pretty easy to get stuck in those games. But they are fun. Okay, they can be really painful, but they can also be really, really fun once you get into them. We've been actually playing one of those games on stream. We've been playing Broken Sword on stream. It's about the mystery of the Templars. I like Broken Sword, but I really like Monkey Island and I really like Discworld. If you're a fan of Discworld and Terry Pratchett, then you should play Discworld. I guess, no, I'm not gonna. This is for the other channel. Okay, I'm gonna show you footage of games. I was very tempted just now to show you footage of some of these games, but let's get back on track. Let's get back to the politics, because that is what this channel is designed for. The other channel is for gaming. So there is this pipeline called the Druzhba pipeline, the pipeline of friendship, that has been established during the Soviet Union to provide oil to Eastern Europe, to countries like Poland, to countries like Hungary, to countries like Slovakia. The pipeline extends all the way to Germany. It has two branches. It branches out into Belarus from Russia, and then branches out into Ukraine. And the Ukrainian branch goes to Slovakia and Hungary. And on the 27th of January, if memory serves, the pipeline has been damaged by a drone attack from the Russian Federation, or at least that is what has been stated by the Ukrainian government, that the pipeline has been damaged by the Russian Federation, and therefore the delivery of oil from Russia to Hungary and Slovakia must be paused because the pipeline is damaged. And that has sparked huge tension between Hungary and Ukraine and Slovakia, because they said that actually this is all Ukraine's fault. Actually, Ukraine is stalling. It does not want to repair the pipeline. And Hungary went as far as to say, if you're not going to restore the pipeline, if you're not going to restore the flow of oil to our country, then we will block all further sanctions, even though that is what Hungary has been doing anyway. We will block the 20th package of sanctions against Russia, and we will block the very important 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine. That is important for Ukraine to be able to continue this war. And similarly, Slovakia has announced, if you don't restore the flow of energy to our country, then we in turn will stop providing Ukraine with emergency electricity, which is also considered a type of a stab in the back, considering that Ukraine is really struggling with electricity right now. As you can see, I am now streaming from Kyiv. I am in Ukraine. There is no electricity at this apartment right now. We are in the middle of a blackout because the infrastructure in Ukraine has been heavily damaged by Russia. The only reason why I can stream right now is because I have a battery to which I plug my modem, to which I plug all my devices. So I wait out the blackouts by having a pretty good battery, which lasts for a long time. But it doesn't change the fact that if Slovakia would just stop providing Ukraine with electricity, it would definitely have a very big detrimental effect on already very bad Ukrainian electricity situation. Okay? So this situation continues, as Hungary and Slovakia continue blackmailing basically Ukraine, threatening to block important loans and block support. Ukraine, in the meantime, has actually offered alternatives. This is, by the way, this is the visual representation of the Druzhba pipeline. The red line represents the Druzhba. It starts in Russia, as you can see. It branches out into Ukraine and Belarus, and from this branch to Poland and Germany, and here Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic as well. But the Czech Republic has done a pretty good job in phasing out Russian energy, so that's kind of the Czech Republic is not considered a factor in these discussions because they did a fine job in not being very dependent on Russian oil. So Ukraine has, actually we have a graph here of dependence on Russian oil. We have here Poland, which, as you can see, the dependency on Russian oil has flattened, has just dropped. The Hungarian, interestingly, dependence on Russian oil since the invasion started has grown. And Slovakia's is also growing now. So Ukraine has actually proposed alternatives to the Druzhba pipeline. Ukraine has not just said, screw you. Ukraine has actually said that the Croatian pipeline is a viable alternative. Let's see, this is the part that we'll actually read out because it has pretty good details that I don't want to miss out on. The Adria pipeline, which runs from Croatia's Adriatic coast to inland Central Europe, also offers an alternative. While Hungary's Orban argues that Adria is only suitable as a backup, his Slovakian counterpart Fico says the pipeline's capacity has never been tested, and the cost could be 5 times higher than that for Druzhba. So that is the situation. Croatia has also openly called out Hungary's nonsense and said that alternatives are ready, alternatives are available, and that Slovakia and Hungary are just choosing not to embrace those alternatives. And that is the current situation. Also, Ukraine has offered other alternatives to the, apart from Adria, it's also offered different alternatives. So we are at a state where there is a big tension between Slovakia, Hungary, and Ukraine. And ever since then, there's also been an additional attack deep in Russia. There was a drone attack on a pump station that delivers crude oil to the Druzhba pipeline, which risks furthering the tensions between these countries because Ukraine wants to diminish Russia's capability of selling crude oil. So of course it will attack pump stations and other things that are able to produce such crude oil, even if it's for the Druzhba pipeline. And the truth of the matter is that Slovakia and Hungary are pro-Russian countries. They are very much Eurosceptical countries. Hungary in particular is weaponizing a rhetoric that Ukraine wants to push, or rather pull, Hungary into the war, that wants to drag Hungary into the war. That is Viktor Orban's main line of attack right now, because Orban is 20 percentage point behind the opposition in the upcoming election polls right now. Viktor Orban is in really big danger of losing power right now in the April elections, and he is very afraid of it, which is why the main brunt of his current election politics is to attack Ukraine and attack the European Union, to say that Brussels and Ukraine want to drag Hungary into war, that Hungarian soldiers will be drafted and forced into the front lines of Ukraine, that Ukraine has deliberately sabotaged the pipeline in order to drive up prices of Hungarian energy and in order to make Orban lose the election. Orban is framing the current situation with the Druzhba pipeline as an attack on Orban personally during his election period, which I find to be complete nonsense. Even if, technically speaking, Ukraine actually would not benefit all that much, in my opinion, from the opposition leader winning, because the opposition leader is not even all that much better when it comes to policy about Ukraine than Viktor Orban. But that's a whole different topic. We don't have to get into that now. So there we are. We even have a continuation of this. Hungary faces choice between Europe and the dictators, opposition leader says. The one thing that I believe that the opposition leader of Hungary might do different than Orban is that he may not openly endorse, he might not openly block sanctions against Russia. Right? So there we go. I don't have sympathy for Hungary and Slovakia. There are viable alternatives to the Druzhba pipeline. I am far more sympathetic with Ukraine, and when it comes to this topic, I'm not even going to hide my bias when it comes to this topic. I feel like Europe should be very much united when it comes to phasing out Russian energy. The cold, hard reality is that anybody that still buys oil or energy from Russia fuels the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Literally just finances Russian aggression against Ukraine. And that should be absolutely stopped. Alternatives should be found, and it's just, if Europe is serious about supporting Ukraine, then it must instill very, very hard policies on phasing out Russian oil and gas, and on offering alternatives to those countries that were heavily dependent on those things. And that would include Slovakia and Hungary. And those alternatives have been offered. It's just that Slovakia and Hungary are not very eager to embrace those alternatives and have opened up their reserves of energy. That has also happened. All right. So that is the Druzhba pipeline situation. I think that it's far more obvious than is being presented. And I completely reject the narrative that Ukraine is trying to meddle in Hungarian elections. I just completely reject that narrative. The narrative that Hungary is trying to spin, that the European Union and Ukraine are just plotting, are just hatching a plot to force Hungarian people to join the military and go to the Ukrainian front lines, as well as that Ukraine has fostered, and allowed the Ukrainian opposition to grow. That is also another whole narrative, that Ukraine has grew the anti-Orban opposition, and that everybody's out to get Viktor Orban, who is the only shield, the only barrier that stands between the war and poor, innocent Hungarian citizens. Also, I might add, as a little bit of a dessert on top of this whole topic, that not only is Hungary accusing Ukraine of sabotaging the Druzhba pipeline, Viktor Orban is also accusing Ukraine of possibly planning an attack on Hungarian energy critical infrastructure, which is why Viktor Orban has ordered the troops to move and defend Hungarian critical infrastructure sites in a very, it's very, how should I, it's greater, and ask, why the fuck would Ukraine attack Hungarian energy infrastructure? It wouldn't. It's just, it's part of election. It's part of the election, believe it or not. It's just for show. It's just for Orban to present himself as the defender of Hungary, because he is far behind in the polls. Everything leads to the conclusion that if he does not tamper the elections in some way, if he does not pull a Belarus 2020, he will just simply lose the election and lose power. So he is very desperate. He's doing very desperate things in order to cling to power. And everybody, including me, are wondering if he will not just try to rig the election outright to win. If he'll just not throw the table and say, yeah, I got 90% of the vote, thank you, I won. Everybody expects that to actually happen, that he will just rig the election and give the victory to himself. It's very self-important behavior of Hungarian head of government. Ukraine has more dire things to deal with. I mean, it's more than just self-important. It's part of a very deliberate, very insidious campaign on the part of Viktor Orban. In fact, I believe I have one more thing to show you when it comes to this subject. This subject is growing and growing. Let's go to bookmarks, because actually Viktor Orban has written an open letter. Okay, Viktor Orban has written an open letter. And I want to read it. I want to read it out. Oh, there are a few things. There are a few videos that we can watch. So I want to first read the open letter from Viktor Orban, because why not, right? If there are primary sources that we can glean into, then why the hell should we not? Where is it? God, I'm struggling to find. I hope I saved it. I sincerely hope that I've saved this open letter. There's also been an announcement by... Okay, I'm just gonna search it manually. Orban open letter. There you go. Viktor Orban's open letter to Volodymyr Zelensky. We will look at this and then the announcement, okay? we will look at these things in a robust way. Open letter to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Mr. President, for 4 years you have been unable to accept the position of the sovereign Hungarian government and the Hungarian people regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. In other words, Hungary has rejected any military aid to Ukraine. Hungary has taken on a very pro-Russian stance and very anti-European Union stance, and has time and time again refused to lessen its dependency on Russian energy, and has time and time again vetoed all new sanction packages against Russia. That is the position of the sovereign Hungarian government regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. Make no mistake, that is exactly what this position is. All right? That is exactly what it is. For 4 years, you have been working to force Hungary into the war between your country and Russia, which is a completely unsubstantiated claim. It is a complete lunacy, a complete fantasy. There's no evidence of that. European countries do not want to send troops. Time and time again, they refuse to send troops. Poland said that it will never send troops. Germany said that it will never send troops. All these countries said they will never send troops to fight on the front lines. And yet, Viktor Orbán tries to spin this narrative that suddenly both Europe and Hungary will just bully Hungarian citizens into being drafted and sent to the meat grinder, because that makes perfect sense, right? During this time, you have received support from Brussels and secured the backing of the Hungarian opposition, which again, there's a narrative that Ukraine is cooperating with the Hungarian opposition in order to overthrow, quote unquote, Viktor Orbán. We also see that Brussels and the Hungarian opposition are coordinating efforts to bring a pro-Ukraine government to power in Hungary, which is very interesting because the opposition is not even all that pro-Ukrainian. The opposition leader has already announced that if they win the election, they will still not send any aid to Ukraine when it comes to military aid, and that they will not really try to phase out Russian energy all that quickly. So the idea that the opposition to Viktor Orbán is a pro-Ukraine government is a laughable proposition. The best that I expect from the opposition government, if it wins, is that it will not block further sanctions anymore. That is the best that I expect from the opposition in Hungary if it wins regarding Ukraine. You know? Yeah, I'm afraid that... I mean, currently, Vladimir says that it doesn't matter what people like Karas or Kafka are thinking about Orbán and his actions. So many things, including what Ukrainians are thinking about Hungarians, are going to determine by the elections. But right now, it looks like Viktor Orbán will lose those elections. He's 20 percentage points behind in the polls. It looks like that unless Viktor Orbán just straight up rigs the election, he will just lose. He will lose power. He's well on the way to lose power right now. He is right now very unpopular. He's not doing well. But just bear in mind, the opposition is not a pro-Ukraine government as much as Viktor Orbán likes to say it. Not really. I have seen what the opposition leader has been promising when it comes to the subject of the war, when it comes to the subject of Ukraine. And it's not a significant departure from Orban's policy. Make no mistake about that. So the whole idea, the whole narrative that Viktor Orban is spinning about Ukraine finding a bigger ally in the Hungarian, that's not a thing. The Hungarian opposition is not an ally to Ukraine. In recent days, you have blocked the Friendship oil pipeline, so the Druzhba pipeline, which is critical to Hungary's energy supply, which is not completely true because there are viable alternatives to the Druzhba pipeline. We have discussed one of these alternatives. Croatia is one of those alternatives, which I believe Hungary has actually started talks with Croatia about that. So even Hungary seems to be very begrudgingly accepting that this alternative exists, actually. Your actions are against Hungary's interests and endanger the secure and affordable energy supply of Hungarian families. I therefore call on you to change your anti-Hungarian policy. Yeah, of course, because all that Ukraine is just preoccupied right now with is its ever rampant anti-Hungarian policy. We, the Hungarian people, are not responsible for the situation in which Ukraine finds itself. Interesting that Viktor Orban frames himself as we, the Hungarian people. We sympathize with the Ukrainian people, but we do not wish to participate in the war, which again is a completely made-up narrative. It's a complete fabrication which is supposed to help Viktor Orban win the elections. That is the only reason why this narrative exists to begin with. We do not want to finance the war. Translation, we will not give Ukraine any military support. And we do not want to pay more for energy, which is, again, alternatives exist. I urge you to immediately reopen the Friendship oil pipeline and refrain from any further attacks on Hungary's energy security, which, again, the pipeline was damaged by Russia, which is why Ukraine has very rightfully so responded by saying, yeah, take it up with Russia. Russia has damaged the pipeline with a drone. It was a Russian drone attack that has damaged that pipeline. Okay? That is what's happening. More respect for Hungary. Budapest, 26 February 2026. So, yesterday. So I guess I'm not super late with that news. I'm not super late with these news considering that it's from the 26th of Viktor Orban. Right? And we have another one. We have another thing that I want to look over. Which is an announcement from Viktor Orban to get us a full view of the whole thing.
Elnök úr,
Mr. President.
ön 4 éve kép...
Oh, that this actually is the same thing that we just read. Yeah. He's basically saying here the same thing that I've read out. I thought that this announcement would be something different, but this is just the same. This is just him reading out the thing that I've read in text.
Energiabiztonsága elleni további támadásoktól. Több tiszteletet Magyarországnak.
Very cynical. It's just a desperate attempt to stay in power. That is what it is. And unfortunately, the topic of the dependency on Russian energy has become a topic of Hungary's election. This will be a referendum, I think. It's clear that the choice is between Europe or the Turkic Council and dictators. So this is the second big news that I wanted to discuss today. And now, back to American politics. Are you excited to go back to American politics? Because I've got news that I feel like has flown under the radar of. I feel like everybody knows this, but I feel like a certain thing about ICE is not being stated enough. And I found it very interesting. God, I want to say that I find it hilarious almost. I just, things are so bad that I kind of actually want to say that it's hilarious. The fact that Trump keeps saying that ICE exists to detain criminals, to catch the crazies, even though it's not even ICE's job. ICE's job is to determine who is and who is not in the country legally. Or rather, who is and who isn't in the country, who is documented and who is not. That is ICE's actual job. But as always, in those cases, it turns out that all accusations are admissions because, as it turns out, in an exclusive story told by Reuters, as it turns out, ICE struggles to vet recruits amid U.S. immigration enforcement push, internal email shows. And what this internal email shows basically is that ICE just en masse recruits people that just, there's this pipeline, very fast pipeline by which people are being recruited into ICE, and there's no proper vetting into the ICE personnel. And people that have connections, possible connections with criminal organizations that are just have criminal records are admitted into ICE. Criminals are admitted into ICE. You could not make this up. The fact that people say, oh yeah, we need ICE to catch all those criminals that commit all those crimes, all those horrible immigrants that are destroying the country because they were let out of prison and sent to the US. They're gonna be dealt with ICE that is being recruited by hiring criminals and convicts. Brilliant. I love this. And by I love this, I mean, I find it to be disgusting and horrible. I think there's a nice quote in this article that speaks to this. Where is it? Where is this? Where is it? Where is it? I want to see. There you go. Recruits flagged for suspected gang ties, criminal charges. Yeah, that's pretty cool, isn't it? Democrats and some former ICE officials have raised concerns that accelerated recruitment could let unqualified or dangerous candidates into the ranks. U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, in a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem last year, compared ICE recruitment to a Border Patrol hiring push in the 2000s that was followed by more allegations against agents. Durbin, the second highest ranking Democratic senator, said ICE's surge would likely result in increased officer misconduct. Because if you don't vet people for their criminal record, then you really risk letting in criminals to supposedly fight criminality, which, again, the irony does not escape me. Clark Trickler McNulty, who was an ICE official under former Democratic President Joe Biden, said background checks help ensure officers have a history of following the law and detect prior actions that could make them vulnerable to blackmail. To speed shortcut or limit background checks or training puts the public and other law enforcement officers at risk, she said. Some recruits have been flagged for problems after being hired. One current and one former U.S. official told Reuters, requesting anonymity to share details on internal operations. Yeah, they just hired some person who have a criminal record or ties to the criminal underground. That's no problem, right? That shouldn't be. That should be a non-issue, right? In one instance last year, 2 recruits were flagged as suspected members of the MS-13 gang based on their tattoos. While attending the training academy in Georgia, the former official said at least 5 other trainees were fired when ICE learned they had active warrants for their arrest. Holy shit, the former official said. I want to read this again because it's just incredible to read. It is just incredible to read. At least 5 other trainees were fired when ICE learned they had active warrants for their arrest. Yeah, imagine if a situation will happen when an ICE officer will kill a civilian again, and it will turn out that ICE officer has an active warrant. How do you feel so far? How do these news feel? How do you feel about the fact that whenever you meet an ICE officer from now on, you can add another question to the back of your head? Whenever you encounter a random ICE officer, from now on, it is not unfair for you to think, I wonder if this person has an active warrant for their arrest. I don't think that's unfair. If the vetting process is being laxed, then, just ask. Okay, it might be unsafe to ask that, but it might actually be unsafe to directly ask an ICE officer if they are, but holy shit. Okay. Holy Holy shit. You just keep that at the back of your mind from now on. Oh, I just got a nice confirmation of a possible conversation with. Do you know a content creator named Merrick? Whoa. Whoa. Okay. Boom. Hold on. My microphone got mixed up, sorry. I just got a message. Yeah, Merrick. Merrick DeVille, yeah. She's going to Ukraine, actually. So I'm going to talk to her about that possibly. This is a perfect opportunity for us to talk. Yeah. It's a perfect opportunity to Paris. I've been wanting to talk to her for a long time, and I guess now is a really good opportunity to finally do so. I'm not hot, so at least for once, there will be a hot individual on the stream to um, balance my coldness. Alrighty. Let me see. Boom. All right. So basically, yeah, keep it in your mind that when you meet an ICE officer, they might have an active arrest warrant against them. I still can't get over that. Actually, I still can't get over that. I want to read that again. At least 5 other trainees were fired when ICE learned that they had active warrants for their arrest, the former official said. They weren't completing the background checks before they would get to the academy, the former official said. One hire was escorted out of an ICE office in February after a problem was detected in his background check, the current official said. ICE does not publish data on the number of new hirees it has fired. NBC News reported in October 2025 that ICE had dismissed more than 200 recruits since the hiring surge began, citing internal data. In another office, a third of hires are waiting for their stalled background checks to be completed, including some who have graduated from training, the official said. Oh shit, some of them are already out in the field and their background checks have not been completed yet. Oh my God. Great. Well, you know what? Now you really have my blessing to wonder if there aren't any active arrest warrants on any of the agents that are actively on patrol. And that just terrifies me. So from now on, be extra careful when talking to any ICE agent, okay? Like it was wise to be careful before when talking to any ICE agent. But you know what? Now I feel like it's crucial to be extra careful when discussing anything with an ICE agent. All right? I think it's fair. Wow. Also, as always, I would like to remind you that I have a Patreon and that you too can become a $1 Patreon. So how do you feel about the fact that ICE officers have now a random chance of possibly maybe having criminal connections or even an active arrest warrant against them? How does that feel? How does that revelation make you feel? Does it make you feel more safe and secure in the hands of your local ICE patrolman or patrolwoman? Incub says, makes me feel anxious, to be honest. It's okay. Simon Pierre Dubay, just think about Merrick now. My goodness. Calm down. It has not been... She just said that she would be willing to talk to me. We haven't finalized anything yet. Alrighty, perfect. So that's actually all the topics that I've had for today. Isn't that great? Any topic that I do now will be an extra. Any topic that I will be doing now is an extra topic. I feel like I've done a good job with the topics so far. Oh my gosh. All right, so any thoughts on the topics so far? On the 3 topics that we've discussed and the news that I have shared with you? And yes, trans people are born trans. I just read a short title called Trans People Are Born Trans, and yes, trans people are indeed born trans. How do we feel? I need some action from the US is fucked. Vladimir says, I'm currently looking at this. Maybe you can explain the nuances. Okay, I hope this is not slop, Vladimir, okay? I trust you. This is not the slop channel, okay? I trust you, please. Vladimir, I trust you. That you have not provided me with slop for the news channel. Wait, have I not correctly... Have I not copied this correctly? Ah, okay.
For most of the past 2 years, Poland's two
Wait, is this what you're saying? Is this actually what you... Is this what you sent me? Why the Polish right is collapsing? I've actually watched this recently. Okay, we can... If you want me to look at this, I'll look at it. If you want me to look at this, I will watch this video. Yeah, sure.
For most of the past 2 years, Poland's two main parties, the centrist Civic Coalition and the right-wing nationalist Law and Justice Party, have remained very close together in national opinion polls, with the gap between them rarely widening beyond a few percentage points. However, since mid-September...
No, it's more... That's not exactly the case. Actually, the Law and Justice Party has been having a big lead over the Civic Coalition, which is why in the current elections, even though the Law and Justice Party has lost to the coalition, it was still the party, the single party with the biggest amount of votes given. The Civic Coalition could not win against the Law and Justice Party on its own. So it's not just a difference of a few percentage points. Because if the Civic Coalition would only have a few, the Civic Platform, if the Civic Platform only had a few percentage points of difference, then it would not need to go into a whole coalition with two other members. If it could win alone, then it would want to win alone.
A gap has opened between the two parties, with the Civic Coalition, led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk, now nearly 10 points ahead.
Also, the Civic Coalition is not a party. The Civic Coalition is like, you know...
Law and Justice, which has fallen to its lowest point in the polls since 2012. So in this video, we'll take a look at the widening gap in the Polish polls, and try and explain why support for the right-wing Law and Justice Party is collapsing.
Not exactly collapsing, but it's weaker than it was. But it's not collapsing per se. It's an exaggeration.
On the night of the 2024 US election, Donald Trump told his supporters that God had saved his life for a reason, alluding to the assassination attempt on his life a few months earlier. In the latest issue of Too Long, we explore how faith-fueled populism, from Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin, has slowly been shaping modern democracy. That's just some of the 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. For decades, Polish politics has been a tug-of-war between two parties. The nationalist right-wing Law and Justice Party, or PIS, which Poland's president Karol Nawrocki belongs, and the centrist Civic Platform, led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk. PIS governed Poland between 2005 and 2007, but the 2007 elections were won by Tusk's Civic Platform, which gained a solid majority, and Tusk served as Prime Minister until 2014, when he resigned to serve as the President of the European Council.
He was also widely unpopular then. He was attacked. He was the fuel for the Law and Justice Party. It was the fuel for the Law and Justice Party to blame Tusk for everything that is bad in politics. Greater End says, include worried about what? I missed it. Oh yeah, I did a whole segment about how the vetting process in ICE is not good, and that if you meet an ICE agent on the street, they might not have the vetting process finished for their hiring. So, you know what? There's a little bit of a percentage chance that your local ICE agent might actually have an active arrest warrant against them. Have fun. Have fun with that. Okay? Your local ICE agent might possibly maybe be an unvetted criminal. Have fun. Have fun. It is sad. It is a sad state of affairs. Like, I actually heard, I've had a guest today that stayed for a few hours. We've talked about various things, and the person gave me some bad news about state of affairs regarding Russia. I'm not gonna say what it is because it's not for me to talk about it, but it is very sad that my immediate reaction was, oh, I'm not surprised at all. And it's the same here. It is such a depressing situation that we keep hearing the worst of news. We keep hearing, oh yeah, ICE agents are not vetted, and five of recruits were found out to have an active arrest warrant against them, and that some people that have already graduated from their training still have unfinished vetting processes, background checks. And it is really sad that people's gut reaction to that is, oh yeah, that's not surprising. That's, whatever. That's, that is a very depressing state of affairs, don't you think? Like we should be surprised by some of these things, and the fact that we are not is very telling, in my opinion. It is very telling that those things just do not surprise us at all. They're not surprising to us at
And
all.
in the 2015 parliamentary elections, the Civic platform failed to produce a candidate as popular as Tusk and lost to the PIS, which governed for 2 consecutive terms until 2023. However, throughout this period, the PIS was plagued by corruption allegations. In 2019, a former Speaker of Poland's lower parliamentary house resigned over allegations he took more than 100 personal flights on a government jet. A former finance minister was accused of having links to a criminal gang, and the head of the central bank, a close friend of the PIS's leader, was involved in a pay scandal surrounding 2 senior aides. PIS also appointed party loyalists to key roles in the media and courts, creating widespread concerns about democratic backstabbing.
By the way, some of these people that were just mentioned now from the ex-Polish government are facing prosecution and find political refuge in Hungary. Hungary now serves as a safe haven for people with criminal charges, for politicians with criminal charges, a political asylum. The ex-justice minister, who allegedly has had criminal ties and faces prosecution, has now found political asylum in Hungary. So that is definitely a nuance that I might add. It's not really nuanced, it's a very straightforward thing. But that part was not mentioned in this video, so I took it upon myself to mention that. It is my duty to mention that
leading
fact.
to the EU blocking over 100 billion euros in funding for Poland. Anyway, after the Polish election in October 2023, Tusk's Civic coalition were able to gain a narrow majority over Law and Justice, which otherwise had the biggest vote share. And they did this by teaming up with 2 other groups. Third Way, itself a coalition of the centrist Polska 2050 and the agrarian Polish People's Party, and the left. In other words, Tusk's government only really edged into power and was always likely to face heavy pushback from PIS loyalists in Polish state institutions. Unsurprisingly, Tusk's multi-party coalition has also struggled with infighting, particularly over issues like public spending and the liberalization of Poland's ultra-conservative abortion laws. And last week, Polska 2050 also lost around half of its MPs following an intra-party split. As a result, for most of the period since the 2023 election...
so it is true that it's a very brittle coalition. And people are also very discouraged by this coalition because the perception is that it has not kept many of its promises. It has not kept any of its promises regarding the abortion law and regarding many other things, regarding gay rights such as a civil union. But also there is the fact that a far-right politician has now won the seat of president and is in the position to veto all efforts from the coalition to pass anything. So that actually has formed an additional obstacle. But there's also the fact that there are certain things that the coalition will not do because of internal friction, because the current coalition is made up of center, left, and right wing. And of course, they do not agree on how things like abortion or civic unions should be handled. So in addition to there being opposition from the Law and Justice Party and their president, you also have an internal opposition within the ruling coalition itself. And those friction actually risk the coalition falling apart at the seams.
Civic coalitions struggled to open up a meaningful lead over PIS, with the two parties closely tracking each other in the polls. However, in the past 5 months, a notable gap has opened up between the two parties. The Civic coalition is now polling ahead of the PIS by around 8 points, its biggest lead over PIS since 2012. Zooming out a bit, we can also see that since 2019-2020, the Civic coalition has steadily risen in the polls, while in the same time period, PIS has fallen from a peak of almost 50% to just 26% now. So what's driving this decline, and why has PIS fallen to its lowest point since 2012? Well, it's essentially because PIS is losing support on two fronts. On one side, it's losing centrist voters to the Civic coalition, and on the other, it's losing anti-establishment voters to the far-right Nationalist Alliance Confederation. Let's start with the first of those, that PIS is losing centre-right voters to Tusk's Civic platform. Tusk is broadly considered to be a popular figure by Polish political standards, and is especially known for his strengths in diplomacy.
Actually, he's not all that popular. You can say that actually the right-wing president is a popular figure in politics for Polish people, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sikorski, is a popular. I'm not so sure if, let's see, politycy popularni w Polsce. Should be like the newest poll. Hold on. Stosunek do polskich polityków. I think Sikorski has posted on his. I'll find it, don't worry. Oh, there you go. Ranking of trust to public figures. Let's see. Let's see if these are the trust polls for Polish politicians. So that's basically how popular they are. The trust, the green being I decidedly trust, and super red being and gray being I don't know them. Dark red being I definitely don't trust. Sorry, what? So Karol Nawrocki, the current president, is the most trusted. After that is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the third is Donald Tusk. So I guess he is fairly trusted, but he is not the most trusted of all politicians. I would not call him the most trusted politician, not by a long shot.
And foreign policy. Specifically, over the past few months, as PIS has declined, Tusk has successfully boosted Poland's geopolitical profile, gaining praise for his fierce criticism of the Kremlin after the incursion of 19 Russian drones into Polish airspace in September, and the subsequent sabotage attack on a Polish railway in November, as well as more recently getting praise for his more assertive diplomacy towards the US, which has seen him work to insulate Poland, one of the US's closest European allies, from Trumpian turbulence.
Yes, actually, a lot of Polish people have declared that they don't see the United States as a dependable ally anymore. So a lot of people see kissing up to Trump as bad policy, and that is the policy of the Law and Justice Party. So that definitely can hurt that party.
As we covered in a recent video, tensions between Poland and the US are at recent highs, with the US ambassador to Poland severing relations with Poland's parliamentary speaker last month following a spat on X. Fortunately for Tusk, this looked like a rather petty move, supporting Tusk's view that Poland should hedge against American unpredictability by helping to strengthen Europe's own defense capacity. Conversely, PIS, which somewhat resembles the US's Republican Party in its social conservatism and populist rhetoric, actually threw its weight behind the US, demanding the Polish speaker's resignation, a position that puts PIS out of step with most of Poland, which generally sees the US negatively under Trump. Tusk's hardening of rhetoric and policy on things like migration may also have won over some voters from PIS. The second reason for PIS's decline, though, is the loss of support on the party's right. Since early 2022, as PIS has fallen in the polls, we can see a corresponding...
There's the rise of the more radical parties in Poland that is taking away votes from the Law and Justice Party, which is also why the Civic Coalition has been pandering more to the right, by the way, to win over some more right-wing parties, which is why the ruling coalition has been harder on things like immigration and asylum seekers. That's part of the game, winning over those more radical voters.
Rise in support for the far-right party Confederation. For context, Confederation doesn't think that PIS is sufficiently nationalist, with the party's 2020 presidential candidate criticizing Poland's then president, PIS's Andrzej Duda, for working with what he called politically correct circles, including, quote, Jewish left-wing mainstream media and large international corporations. Confederation also calls for a total ban on abortion and wants to transform Poland into an ethnocracy based on Catholic principles. The party has essentially tried to normalize its far-right policies and create a reputational shield around itself by portraying itself as a more competent, meritocratic alternative to PIS, with a stronger focus on nativism and nationalist ideology. Anyway, at the October 2023 election, Confederation won 7% of the vote, but it's now polling at around 13%, implying that it's doubled its support. This is largely a consequence of disillusionment among hardline right-wingers, who see PIS as having compromised its nationalist agenda, for instance on EU matters, immigration, or in not pushing through more sweeping judicial changes. This has heightened perceptions of PIS as another establishment party, as opposed to a radical one. As such, Confederation has swept up the more hardline ideological purists and anti-establishment voters, particularly young men who have become frustrated with PIS. More recently, another new and even further right party, the Crown,
Grzegorz Braun. This is Grzegorz Braun.
Rising to 9% in the polls. In conclusion then, PIS has struggled to maintain its relatively broad...
I actually still don't know what happened to his eye. I have to look it up after this. I have to look up what happened to... I thought Tusk had a massive public turnaround during his campaign. Yeah, but he had a massive turnaround not just for his party. Tusk had a massive public turnaround for the entire coalition, keep in mind. Right? His party did not overwhelmingly win. The coalition did. That's why there needs to be a coalition to begin with.
Coalition, losing voters in both directions. And unless it can get a grip on this fragmentation, this could result in a further fall in the polls. This, however, does not mean that Donald Tusk can rest easy. His coalition partners are floundering in the polls, and the emergence of new far-right parties pose their own challenge. And the veto power held by Poland's PIS president continues to be an obstacle for Tusk in implementing his agenda. As we mentioned earlier, the latest issue of our...
There you go. We watched the thing. Now I want to look up what happened to Grzegorz Braun eye. Wait, really? Oh. Oh, it's some health issue. Yeah, it's some eye issue. He had a failed eye surgery. Yeah, he had failed eye surgery and there has some deteriorating eye thing and he has to wear an eye patch. Yeah. Sad, isn't it? I don't know. I don't feel like mocking someone's house just because I don't like them. See? Kansas is essentially hunting down trans people. But there you go. The far right are not collapsing. No, the far right is not collapsing. It's just that this particular party is not doing that great in the polls. But the fact is that worst case scenario, the Law and Justice Party could just go into a coalition with one of those other far right parties that are gaining votes. That's not out of the question. That the Crown, the Confederacy, and the Law and Justice Party could just get into a coalition together. It's not completely out of the question. His logo is a heart. It's interesting to me that more left or center-leaning politicians propose basic stuff like love and peace, etc., and the right somehow still gets any political traction whatsoever, being directly oppositional to basic human ideals. I mean, they direct their hate to to minorities, so that's how they can get away with it. That is exactly how they can get away with it. All right. Let me see if I can find some additional news. I still have a burger. I have really good news for you. I still have one burger left. Let's see if there's any more. Yeah. Yeah, it's exclusive. I struggle to vet. We've talked about this. Uh-oh. 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 Oh well. Cook up your burger in the microwave. There's a blackout right now. You're being cruel to me, Greater Ray. Yeah, go heat up your burger in the microwave. Plug up to that non-existent electricity. Thank you. Jeez Louise, okay? Oh boy. Cannot believe you. Yeah, there's the site is white, so it's just it's the monitor. But trust me, there is no electricity right now. Let's see. NPR. Hillary Clinton calls House oversight questioning repetitive in 6-hour deposition. National news. Oh, oh. Civil rights leaders say the racial progress Jesse Jackson fought for is under threat. How's that? What's that for news, huh? How do you feel about that? How do you like them apples? More bad news? You ready for more bad news? The public begins paying respects to the late Rev. Jesse Jackson on Thursday. The civil rights icon will lie in repose in his hometown of Chicago through Friday before events next week in Washington, D.C. and in his native South Carolina. May he rest in peace and may his spirit live forever, his daughter Santilla Jackson said after Jackson's death last week at age 84. Let us continue the work, everyone. That is what he would want us to do, she said, encouraging a new generation to take up his fight. You can't talk about black political power in the US without considering the groundbreaking presidential campaigns of Jackson in the 1980s, says the Rev. Raphael Warnock, a Georgia senator. He gave me a glimpse of what is possible and taught me how to say I am somebody, says Warnock, one of 5 black US senators serving in Congress, a historic high. He says Jackson broadened the lane of what's politically possible for black Americans and other people of color, forcing the Democratic Party to be more inclusive. I guess we're going to discuss this later. Because I have not prepared for this topic, I've just encountered it. All right. I guess that's it for today. I have talked about the news. That was a very nice stream, wasn't it? How do you rate today's stream out of 10? How do you rate today's stream? In the rating out of 10. Merrick out of 10. Simon, Pierre Dubay. Don't be a pervert. Okay. Okay, I'm going to end stream then, and we will come back to stuff later, okay? I only have love for all of you. Thank you for always being here and helping this channel grow. This new channel that I'm taking a gamble with the whole new network thing, you know? You know what I mean? Do you understand my feelings? So I will see you all. Good night. Guten Abend. Bye bye. Bye bye.